I think in my job at the Australian Ceramics Association, I've been very aware of a big gap in the training of ceramic artists, and the lack of people offering opportunities in studios. And one of the things I learned is people love to go into studios and see how people make things. This brings together that opportunity to go and see how a master potter or an experienced potter works on a longer term basis. And the idea is that these younger students and people wanting to work in a more professional way can work beside someone, help them with what they're doing in the studio, do a lot of observing, a lot of absorbing of information about how they be a professional potter, how they're going to make a business of it. And so it's not just a hobby thing. We want to help people have a sustainable practice, and we want them to be sort of in a situation where they see others who've succeeded at that and how they do it.
So my job today is to talk to you a bit about how this all came about. We all have a passion for ceramics here. Mine started when I was in primary school. I was a production potter for a couple of decades. I trained at East Sydney Tech in the early 80s, and the genesis of this idea came when our son Jacques was interested in developing his skills. And I had a conversation with my old East Sydney Tech buddy, Julie Bartholomew, who's here. And I said, well, where would Jacques go to get the sort of training that we had at East Sydney Tech? And she said, well, it's very limited. And we all know the slow and steady decline that arts has had in our culture. So in my research, I stumbled across Adopt a Potter, which was started in the UK by Lisa Hammond. And I thought, well, why can't we have something similar here? I mentioned this to Julie. Julie gave me an introduction to Vicki. And Vicki was kind enough to spend a couple of hours on the phone talking to me and updating me on what TACA, the Australian Ceramics Association, had been doing in that space, which had been considerable. I had then joined a working group with Vicki and the board, and we specifically worked in that working group on mentorship. Holly McDonald, is it McDonald?
McDonald.
Yeah. She was working and produced the Tools for Practice, which was an online mentoring program, but it wasn't really what I was focusing on. And I knew Vicki had picked up this passion as well and had a vision for something that was inexperienced potters working alongside experienced potters in their studios. I've got a bit of competition.
Yeah. What are they up to out there?
They've just arrived this afternoon, so they're all a bit
excited. All right. So I had met Vicki and we had talked at length. I'm in far north Queensland. She's down in Botany. Lots of Zooming, lots of phone calls. I came to visit Denbigh this time last year, about 9 months ago, and Susie was here with her MacArthur group, and we talked again about Adopt a Potter and how we could have something in Australia. I recognised through meeting Ian and Susie their philanthropic generosity here at Denbigh and their offer to raise funds. I returned back to far north Queensland and I contacted Vicki, who had now retired from the Australian Ceramics. I'd given her 6 months to get bored. And I said, Vicki, I've met this woman, Susie, She's got this farm. It's amazing. There is possibilities for fundraising. They're very generous people. We are starting to plan about an event at Denbigh. Would you like to be involved? And Vicki responded with, I think that'd be fascinating to be involved.
Did I?
You did.
So basically, so far, we have formed a public company and we're the 3 directors. It's a not-for-profit company. We opened a bank account. We set up an Instagram account, which you can now follow. We've set up a very basic website. Is Marika here?
Yes.
Where is she?
She's on the barbecue.
Oh, right. Marika, lovely Marika, thank you. We spent a bit of time about a few months ago now, filling in interminable forms to apply to be a charity and to get DGR status. So we've done that. I've submitted that application. We're yet to hear. But that will help us with fundraising because people will be able to donate and get a tax deduction for their donation. So that will help us a lot. If we can get that also, we can apply, being a company, a not-for-profit company, we can then apply for grants from other arts funding bodies. We will then be open for applications and they'll be due in about 2 or 3 months later. So we're looking at applications closing in late October, and then we have November to assess them with a panel, and then we make an announcement in December for our first placement or placements if we manage to raise enough money. So the most important points about what we're doing is that the students have to be quite experienced in ceramics. So they have to either have completed a diploma, advanced diploma at TAFE, a Bachelor of Arts at NAS, something like that, some sort of ceramics training. If there is the possibility that they can apply without that, but they need to be able to prove that they have had lots of experience elsewhere. So it could be that they've done lots of workshops overseas, workshops here, they've helped people in their studios. So we're not stopping those people from applying, but it has to be reasonable experience. It can't be just a couple of night classes. So we need people that have got good ceramic knowledge to be applying to be mentored. So they want to go the next step and find out more about how to run a good, sustainable pottery practice, and by finding someone that would like to mentor them, they will then be able to submit an application together with the mentor potter for this project. So that one part of what we did, and Jean referred to it a little bit, is that we knew about Adopt a Potter in the UK. So we had a terrific Zoom with Lisa Hammond back about 6 months ago, and after that we realised that we could bring with us some of what they've done over there, but not all of it. And so we're starting off with some of the same terms and conditions, but we're realising after quite a few discussions with people that we have to be a bit more open and flexible because Australia is a bigger country and there's not as many production potteries in Australia as there are in the UK. So I'd like to welcome the panel up to the stage. Marian Howell. Marian is from Sydney, former head of ceramics at National Arts School and the ceramic design studio at Gymea TAFE. She now teaches part-time at the ceramic design studio in Gymea. Marian also conducts ceramic tours to Morocco, Japan, Korea, China, France. Lucky girl. She enjoys throwing, decorating large bowls, vases and smaller functional pieces. And she also sails yachts. The next on my list is someone that was here but has gone to hospital. And that is Jan Kesby. So she slipped over an hour before this started. And it looks like she might have broken her wrist. So we're wishing her well. She was going to be up here, but sadly not. Sandy Lockwood, would you like to come up, please? Sandy started making with clay in 1975. She initially worked in a pottery production studio and then went on to study ceramics at East Sydney Tech, which is now NAS. Since 1980, she has been a full-time maker and a part-time teacher, both in Australia and in many countries overseas. Most recently, and I'm very jealous, in Italy, at La Meridiana. She holds a PhD from the University of Wollongong. She makes beautiful wood-fired salt-glazed work in her studio in Balmoral in the Southern Highlands. Welcome, Sandy. Meg Patey. Meg Patey has been making pots for most of the last 40 years in her Colo Vale studio in the, once again, Southern Highlands. She spent 4 years as a ceramics apprentice in several potteries in Australia, England and France. She's always worked in earthenware and loves its lower firing range, and she combines two traditional ceramic techniques, slipware and reduced lustre, which are just gorgeous. She also played a huge role as director at Sturt Craft Centre for 11 years from 1998 to 2009. Thanks for joining us. Steve Sheridan. Steve lives in Wentworth Falls and is from the Blue Mountains, in the Blue Mountains. He's been potting again for about 40 years. His initial training was here in Australia. Then he lived and taught in the UK for nearly 15 years. In 1998, he returned to Australia and in 2001 built his studio, which is just gorgeous if ever you get the chance. He holds open studios regularly, as does Meg and Sandy. So all these people having open studios, take a chance if you get that. Steve makes the most beautiful functional ceramics fired in a gas kiln. Lots of celadon and gorgeous blood red glazes. Over the last few years, he's welcomed several UK potters into his studio as assistants after they took part in Adopt a Potter in the UK. And our last panellist is Steve Williams. Steve lives in Wingham, near Taree, New South Wales, where he produces a range of wood-fired ceramics using local clays, rocks and timber from his... he makes the pots in his Dolly's Flat studio. He taught in the early 1990s in Wagga Wagga, around the time he met Owen Rye. He undertook a teacher exchange program in Denmark in 2005, and after teaching in TAFE for many years, he left that in 2013. And most recently, he's been teaching at Sturt. So welcome our panellists. Give them a hand. Everyone's here as a volunteer and is giving their time so generously to be here. So thank you to you all. So the first question is, who was your first mentor and how did that come about?
My mentor first was probably Chester Neely. Introduction to wood firing and pots that I really enjoyed. So as a person that kind of made me appreciate place and slowing down, for me it's probably Chester. Because I spent a career kind of avoiding contact with everybody really. Isolation and not knowing what people are doing is really important. And I know that might appear oppositional, but for me that's what's allowed my work to develop as having this Australian quality, because I've had to invent and problem solve and innovate, and that's what Janet Mansfield saw in my work. And I remember once she said to me, she said, "You're like the Hills Hoist of Australian potters." And like she was a figure of very few words in terms of that contact. Like she always worked from a distance, but that was, yeah, really important.
What stimulated my interest in the first place was Ivan McMeekin. So I then decided, okay, I need to see if I can make this thing happen. And I went looking for somebody to work with. I went to the Craft Potters Association gallery in Brisbane and looked at pots there and turned them over and collected names. So I collected a list of people that I would approach. So the first person on the list was Kevin Greeley. The salient point about this is that he had just received a grant from the Australia Council to set up a workshop to take on trainees. So for me, it was an extraordinary serendipity. I arrived at the right place at the right time. There's one person that came shortly after I'd finished my apprenticeship, was Gwyn Hanson-Piggott. And there was something about her work. There's a spirit there that I think is recognisable. And she had a voice. You know, her work has changed and evolved over the years. But I had about 8 months working with Gwyn, and that for me is probably the most enduring in that sense in terms of a mentor, because it was really about what it meant to you, where your heart was, as it were, what your voice was going to be, and that's something that was a very special thing, I think, that came from Gwyn.
So the first place I worked at was a production pottery, and so we threw a lot, we packed a lot, and I learnt a lot. It was fantastic. 2.5 years, 5 days a week. But I think my first mentor was me then travelling and looking for the pots that I really wanted to make. And I found Susie Atkins in France. And how did I find them? I just kept writing them letters and telegrams. And we didn't have, phones in those days. They lived in the Auvergne, in the middle of nowhere. I just...
Hearing quite a bit about early pre-social media, about people just visiting potters in countries, looking them up and finding them.
And I guess I was lucky. I kept knocking on the door until finally a position was there, and so I worked with Susie. So I call her my mentor because I was looking for someone I could work with to help me see the kind of spirit that I was looking for in my work. They were actually stoneware salt glaze potters, but that kind of didn't matter to me. I was looking for a quality in the person and a quality in the pot making and even the size of the workshop, and it was in France, where we made pots to use, we went to markets, it was wonderful. I think the opportunity to work in someone else's workshop is amazing and essential, and you learn so much.
I'll do it quickly. Because I think mentors are people that you talk to over time. There's always people who say one significant thing to you and you go, right, okay, that's it, that's really, really good. Some of those, yeah. So that's sort of my general mentor thing. I was lucky enough to get a job working in a pottery. I worked for Derek Smith in Blackfriars Pottery in 77, 78. And it was really workshop skills, lots of them. Packing, glazing, jigger and jollying, and how to tap on centre in order to trim the hundreds of stacked jigger and jolly pots that I'd made. So, so good experience, but nothing of my own voice. So then my journey I went to National Art School in order to find out, what are my pots? I don't know what they are. So, and one of my most significant teachers at National Art School was a Chilean fellow called Diogenes Fari, which a few people might know of. And what was good about him was he just cut straight to the bone. He didn't muck around with compliments, or he just said things, and he encouraged thinking outside the box. And that was actually the most significant thing for me. So I've just had some really good conversations, and it's those things that stick. And every now and then I'll make a little note. You know, that person said that, or this meant something. So it's not a person, it's a community of people that share, we're sharing ideas. So yeah.
Because I was a 19-year-old at East Sydney Tech, just being an ordinary student, and my mum sent letters to a few potters that she knew who knew other potters, and said, would you like to have my daughter for the Christmas holidays? And I went, Mum, what have you done? Anyway, being a good daughter, I then went and worked with 4 different families over the Christmas holidays, and they were all became mentors in their own right. Keen Ceramics was one of them, and I lived with their family. And there was also Jim and Jean Tyler, who would have passed on by now because they were elderly then, but bringing up their, well, elderly to me as a 19-year-old, bringing up their family. So they had a pottery just outside of Gosford with an A-frame pottery, and I stayed in a little tiny caravan by myself for 2 weeks while they would come in the daytime and then leave to have their family life at night. And so I had the privilege of seeing what a husband and wife team could do, bringing up small children, just making pots every day, and the opportunity to just make pots, because I was only 1 year into making pots myself. And it gave me the rhythm that a pottery has. And it gave me the belief that I'd made the right decision to keep going as a potter. And I think that was a real turning point, so that when I went back to second year studying at East Sydney, I went with the confidence knowing that this was the life I wanted to lead. And I took skills and knowledge, but I also took the feeling of what it was like to be a potter. And I don't, you know, even though I'm a great believer in public education, it's something that's trickier to do in an institution than it is to do in somebody's workshop. And I thought it was summed up beautifully in this last tour to Korea. We visited a lady called Jo Bai, and Bei Jo, and when we came to her studio, she was a bit embarrassed about the extent of what was lying around, and the little pieces and all the little sculptures she had and all the leftover bits of artwork. She was saying, sorry, it's so crowded. And for us, it was like being in Wonderland. It was, and she went on to describe it as, welcome to my universe. She believed her studio was her universe. It represented her mind, the way she thought, everything about how she felt. And that just completely clicked with me, because thinking about this foster a potter, I thought, well, that's the connection the person working with the mentor will get. They will be in that artist's universe, and everything that comes from that is where the magic comes from. So I wouldn't say I had one mentor, but I do feel going to people's studio, wherever you do it, is a valuable experience.
Sandy Lockwood. I was lucky enough, I came to it only 10 years ago, and I was lucky enough to do a few workshops with Sandy, and I think part of the reason I actually wanted to set up Foster a Potter and talk to Christy about it at Sturt before I met Jean. So, because I realised I was very lucky to be able to afford to go and pay for these courses that so many of these fabulous potters set up. And I was aware that there were younger people who were coming out of schools who just couldn't afford that. And really, people who wanted to make a living from pottery, there was no apprenticeship programs for. So I'd sort of looked into, Lisa Hammond's program and talked to Christy, but she wasn't in a position to get it up and running then. But yeah, Sandy, I was lucky enough to have her also for 3 months in Italy, which was extraordinary. She's the most incredible teacher.
The ones that are memorable to me are the ones that impacted me emotionally and gave me a belief in the fact that you could actually create a life as a potter. And it was a valuable thing and a justifiable thing to be passionate, obsessionable about clay.
Thanks, everyone. I think that gives us a good idea of the range of mentors that you've had, and some of them are short conversations and some are long periods in a studio next to someone. So I think that sort of, for people listening, that might resonate with you, but also give you ideas for where you might go if you were going to apply.
When I was in Gulgong, I was talking to some people who had apprenticed in England, and I asked them how did they find their mentors, and I was really impressed with their responses. They didn't just say, oh, because a lot of people who want to be mentors think that we're going to say, here you go, here's a mentor, and they were saying, no, I wrote letters to 12 potters who I really liked. I researched them, I went out and spent time with them. One lady, this girl said I went all the way out to Oxford, I rented a place, I spent 3 days with her, we talked, she showed me what she did, what she expected, and I realised at the end of 3 days that probably really wasn't what I wanted to get, even though I really liked her. So she actually went and met these potters in her own time, at her own expense, until she found someone where she thought, this is going to be a good fit, and she stayed there for a year and got a lot out of it.
But we realise that people do need time to do some of this research into finding who they're going to submit their application with. So remember that the applications will be joint applications, and the potter and the mentor potter and the student have to agree in the application to what their aims are, what they're each prepared, what the student potter's looking for, what the mentor potter wants help with, what they're prepared to give. And so the application is joint, and it's a very important part of what will it'll take time to put that together. Yes, it will be an annual application. It will open mid-year. It will be open for 3 months or so, and we will then have a panel of people that will work with the board of Foster Potter. So we've invited Holly McDonald to join the panel this time. We haven't confirmed the panel, but we've asked Holly because she was very involved in the Australian Ceramics Association with our planning that we did towards a project like this, but we never got there. We got to Tools for Practice, but we didn't get to this sort of project. So I've asked her to join us as a young emerging artist with a lot of passion for mentoring to join our panel, but we haven't got the other panellists. But there'll be a panel and we'll make a decision and let people know. And it will depend on funding.
We realise that in Australia there aren't a lot of production studios. I think in England the model is very much that way. In Australia we have very different model here. You know, there are a lot of people who do sort of very artistic work. They're not necessarily doing production work, so we are open to any applications. We have to just be really open-minded to see what comes through. So, yeah, don't feel limited.
I'd just like to say that this is the start, and this is Australia, and it's going to grow and evolve in an Australian way. And we've tried to set this up in a way that's simple, that's clear, and we will build into it as much flexibility as we can to enable it to grow in the way it needs to grow. We can't actually project how it's going to go, and I think that's the beauty of what we're doing, is that we're taking this forward. It's a pioneering project. So I think, whatever comes out of this, it'll be so interesting in 12 months' time to see where we're at and what we've been able to achieve. And I think our questions will just keep growing.
I thought we'd have a quick discussion about what makes a good mentee.
For me, in that situation, it is about someone who's aligning with those qualities around, wild native stuff and keeping it really, really simple. I don't use very many materials.
It's always a learning experience if you just try to open the guardrails a bit and observe maybe occasionally what you didn't know you were going to find.
So kind of trying to work out whether the person that's asking to come and stay is somebody I might be able to get on with. So getting on with them is pretty important. It's not so many Australians have ever approached me, but I've had a couple of times. Meg and I have shared someone. I actually think sometimes that 1 or 2 days a week is a good model. So 1 or 2 days into more than one workshop is probably a good model for a mentee as well, where they're getting more than one experience, because to actually give one person enough to do for 5 days, if you're not throwing they're not throwing your work, it's pretty full on. Somebody that will be prepared to stay for duration to learn things. And I think the only one downside thing, not with this one, but I've had with people coming, is most people want to come because they want to wood fire, and that's fine, but you have to manage that pretty carefully. So I don't really like someone who talks all the time and asks questions about every step of what you're doing, because when I'm wood firing, I'm actually concentrating. So it was like, we think you need to be quiet now, just watch.
It is one thing that's come up in our discussions that we've had with a few focus groups is the value of working next to someone.
Very, very important. Because I'm concentrating if I'm making pots. If they kind of glance over and watch what I'm doing, that's fine. But if I'm not doing a demo, and it's a different thinking and a different way of approaching it if it's a demo.
It's a lot to teach somebody. There's a lot expected to have someone in your space all the time. So it's very much, is there a connection? Not every mentor that you meet is going to want to take you on. It is, as Sandy said, you've got to get on with them. And I think what Sandy said to me the other day was really interesting. Not just, give someone a list to do, but don't ask questions all the time. And if you've got a list of jobs to do, don't just go over and start watching and staring at, the mentor potter and what they're doing, because that takes away from their enjoyment of just really being respectful that this is an amazing opportunity you get to listen and to watch and to learn and to train your eye, looking at really good pots. That's really important too. But a good mentor also is someone who's going to take an interest in your work. It's not just someone that you pay to do jobs. A good mentor will say, well, show me your pots, maybe once a week. Where are you, where do you want to go with this, and giving advice and feedback. Yeah, and it's important to keep in mind that foster potter mentorships are open to everyone in Australia. To make sure we've raised $10,000 to be able to offer our first placement in 2025, we're going to hold an open day here at Denbigh this September. So we'll be inviting the public into the garden and the studios in the outbuildings. We'll be opening the pottery and the wood and stone sculpture studio across the way. There'll be a new exhibition space where artists who live and work on the farm will be displaying their work. And there may even be a puppet show from our resident puppeteers who could be lurking somewhere. This hay shed will become a cafe, and we'll have live music, and all the proceeds will go towards Foster a Potter. So if anyone would like to help with that in any way, by donating cups to be sold, or perhaps a special piece of pottery to be auctioned, or even baking a cake for the cafe, that would be really wonderful. And I just want to finish by reflecting on a conversation I had with Sandy and Meg the other night, to say that it's events like this, and it's gallery openings such as tabled last night at Manly Art Gallery, exhibitions in every single gallery across Australia, all big and small, all those little exhibitions. It's clay festivals such as Gulgong, classes in community colleges, and places like Sturt, which we love. They're just so important for our souls, because these are the places where we find connection with our tribe, and that's what brings us joy, and that's how we learn and we grow and we blossom. So, yeah, thank you.
And why do you think the Foster a Potter initiative is so important?
I think it's really important for younger people to get some chance to actually experience a workshop, because it's a very different place to a college.
I think you learn a lot more than you think you're going to learn. You might learn quite different things. You might go in and think, I'm going to learn this, and you don't learn that, you learn something else.
Well, I can see it complementing public education, because I've always worked in public education and I really believe in it, but I also know what it can't provide, and it can't provide the time that it takes to evolve as an artist. So I think when you're in an artist studio working personally one-to-one with them, you get the real story. I think this project will give people an opportunity they couldn't have anywhere else.
I think because of the situation we find ourselves in at this point in time, where universities are shutting down, training colleges are shutting down, you've got the growth of independent studios, and you also have, dare I say it, an ageing demographic who in fact hold a lot of knowledge and a lot of skill, and it actually provides an arena where that skill can be passed on and exchanged.
So we need more opportunities for people to actually learn the full gamut of things that being a potter is involved with. So apprenticeships is an obvious way to do it, and there has been nothing here in Australia. If we can find a way of doing that, I think it's something that's really necessary and would be very valuable.
This is an amazing opportunity to connect early career people with established or experienced people to create that time-rich learning. And I think that's what makes it really special.
Give me love, love, love.